As the summer travel season approaches, I'm excited to let you know about 2 upcoming Taste Travels, our immersive travel series hosted by cookbook authors and me, Matt Rodbard. On June 15th, I will be joining the Mediterranean dish author Susie Carache in Barcelona for an incredible week of culinary tours, cooking classes, and plenty of wine and jamon. And on September 15th, I will be joining author and baker Mauricio Leo of The Perfect Loaf for a tour of northern Italy. We will visit artisanal Parmigiano Reggiano and balsamic vinegar producers, take a masterclass in the art of panettone, and of course, eat plenty of stuffed pasta and mortadella in and around Emilia-Romagna. Both trips are nearly sold out and closing soon. If interested, write into hello@tastecooking.com and we will get you the information. That's hello@tastecooking.com. I hope to see you on one of our taste travels this summer.
That is exactly what differentiates halva from almost any other candy, and so it is very much a textural experience. And, you know, it should be a bit flaky and a bit dense. You should be able to put it in your mouth and it should just melt gently.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Driven by her passion for food and travel, Rachel Simons traded her corporate law career for an entrepreneurial adventure, co-founding Seed & Mill, New York's first store devoted entirely to sesame products. Located in the iconic Chelsea market, the business quickly captured the hearts of locals and tourists alike, evolving into a nationally celebrated brand. Today on the show, I speak with Rachel about her growing business and her terrific new cookbook, Sesame: Global Recipes and Stories of an Ancient Seed.
Also on the show, I chat with fashion writer Emilia Petrarca about the rise of the resSTOREaunt, aka restaurants attached to luxury brands in New York City and beyond.
Rachel Simons, welcome to This Is Taste. How are you?
I am fantastic, Matt.
It's great to see you. I've been such a fan of Seed & Mill. How long have you been running it?
So we are 9 years about a week ago.
No way, 9 years.
Yep,
Wow.
I know.
I mean, I want this conversation. We're going to talk about Seed & Mill and what you represent and the way you think about sesame products and tahini. But then we'll get into your brand new book, which I love. It's absolutely one of my favorites of the year. It's really, this subject needed a really complete book, and you've done that. Before we get to that, you're a New Yorker. Let me ask you, where have you been dining out in the city? I always want to know. I think our listeners want to know.
Yeah, well, I've been in New York for 10 years, and
You're official.
I'm official.
We'll call it that.
I have a green card.
Nice.
And I've always lived on the same block in Chelsea, and I am very, very loyal to my Chelsea community. So I fell in love with a couple of local restaurants, particularly Cook Shop and now Chouquette, which is on my block. They're all kind of restaurants within the Vicky Freeman Bowery group, and honestly, I just love to be in my neighborhood. Obviously, Cedar Mill's got our locations in Chelsea Market, so I do try to kind of stay local. And big shout out to the community that I kind of see every day. I walk past those restaurants every day, and they make me feel like a member of the family.
It's a great neighborhood, and you get to walk to your location in Chelsea Market where you've been.
Yeah,
you're one of the established Chelsea Market vendors and stores. Let's talk about Seed & Mill a little bit. Tell me exactly, what you're selling there. A little bit about the mission of the company.
So Cedar Mill sells anything that comes from sesame seeds, let's say. So the heart of our business is all about sesame, and the name Cedar Mill comes from, we're milling these seeds, and that creates this product called tahini. And then tahini is the core ingredient in what makes halva. And then we have a tahini soft serve. We've got some halva-covered nuts. But the hero of our business is all about sesame seeds.
The sesame seed is at the center, and your book covers it so beautifully, and we'll get into that. When you were thinking about launching Seed & Mill, I'd love to get your take on the broader halva and tahini market. Of course, is a historical product. Of course, we were able to buy it at many stores in New York and around the country. Great products. I would say, and my thought is that when you launched Seed and Mill, you were certainly, I would say, inspired by some of those brands, but you really kind of got into like the terroir about where the sesames came from, the production. What were you thinking when you were like, I'm going to open a tahini sesame company 10 years ago? Where was the like opportunity?
All right, Matt. I mean, I don't know whether or not this is the right story to share on this podcast, but sometimes I feel like there's a lot more strategy or thought that other people attribute to our business objectives and goals when we started. So if I'm going to be really honest with you, when we started the business 9 years ago, I had just moved to the city. I'd traveled a lot, and I'd lived in the Middle East for a while, but I'd also lived in London and I'd lived in Hong Kong, and I was really my passions in life were food and travel. And I thought, I met my co-founders, and honestly, the three of us just thought we're going to start a business around sesame because we had an affinity for the product and the region, particularly the Middle East where it had come from. But the business really grew into something much more today than what we thought it would be at the start. And yeah, we were very careful about our ingredient sourcing because they are core values that we all had, and I certainly have when I eat or when I shop and when I enjoy food. But it became this moment, particularly around Chelsea Market, where I was just blown away by the reaction, and I was blown away by conversation after conversation with customers at the counter. And I almost had a revelation about 6 months after we opened the business that I was thinking, oh my God, wow, this really is a business. And not only is it a business, this is a vehicle for incredible storytelling and community building. And the number of people from different communities and backgrounds that I have met at that counter, even today when I go there 9 years later, I couldn't stand there for an hour without hearing a really personal story from someone. And that really drove the growth and the passion and the excitement. And then the strategy all came after the fact. It wasn't there 9 years ago.
Amazing that you're honest about this. And I think that's a great thought about some founders go into things for love and some founders go into things for like to hit some points on a deck. And you clearly are the prior.
There was no deck.
There was no deck.
I didn't even know what a deck meant.
Amazing. I mean, that's the best. Let's talk a little bit about the product. Where are these sesames coming from? How are you making the product? Is it made here in New York? Is it made somewhere else? Give us a sense of how it's made.
Yeah. I mean, so I will just backtrack for 1 second. I mean, when I say there wasn't any strategy and deck, there definitely wasn't that. But we were very, very careful from day one about, well, what are the ingredients in our products? Where are these ingredients coming from? And who do we want to make them with us, and do we trust them, and are we proud to sell this product? And I really wanted to be proud of the ingredients and the values of the business. So we source all of our sesame from Ethiopia. There's a little bit of a exception now because sadly there is some conflict, a lot of conflict in Ethiopia. So we've had a few sourcing challenges, and about 90% of our seeds are still sourced from Ethiopia, with some from Tanzania and the African region around Ethiopia. The reason for that is that the seeds in that particular region are a little bit sweeter. They've got a really high ratio of oil to fiber. So what that means is when you crush those seeds, you get a really good emulsification and a great amount of oil. They're not so bitter, and bitterness is often something that people feel when they eat tahini. So it was important for us that they would taste a little bit more sweetness and have a great color and texture experience. So we source the seeds in Ethiopia, then we move everything over to Israel, where we process the seeds, we grind the seeds, we brine them. All of the extra flavor that comes from the roasting of the seeds happens over there, and then we bring it over here.
I love that chain, and I've heard this from other tahini companies, and I think that's like the way to do it. You have to, get that product out of Ethiopia, find a great producer, and then you bring it back to New York. And do you have a culinary kitchen in New York to make the halva and other products too?
So we make our ice cream on site in Chelsea Market, but actually our halva is also made in Israel.
Amazing.
And our halva is all made by hand. I think everything around the tahini and halva industry, it is still a very artisanal.
Oh, sure.
Your product. The harvesting of the sesame is all done by hand, not so much the grinding of the seeds, but the halva is all made hand-folded by a family that we partnered with who've been making it for generations.
It's such an amazing product. I'm a huge fan. I think we have it in our fridge most of the time. And, no, I love it. And there's a lot of great tahini out there. This has been a booming category in CPG. Yeah. And one last CPG-related question. What's it like to work right now in CPG and sell products, online, at your retail shop, through partners? I mean, it's a product that needs refrigeration. So it's a difficult product to sell because you have to have the cold chain working correctly. What's it like working in that world?
I mean, yeah, CPG is a really difficult channel, and it gets more and more difficult every month, every year. Halva and tahini are shelf-stable products. They don't need refrigeration, and it's an interesting point. Our halva especially, halva never needs refrigeration, and in fact it's sold and displayed all throughout the deserts of the Middle East and will hold up. The reason that we refrigerate it or recommend refrigeration is that we're very conscious about not putting any palm oil in our products. And for that reason, sometimes they get a bit oily. So it is better to store it in the fridge to stop that happening. But yeah, I mean, I think CPG has become a very transactional. I mean, it's very much, there's a lot of middlemen in the industry. What gives me joy and passion to continue in the CPG industry is really the community and the customers and their stories. And that kind of brings us back to the book. But when I see our products on the shelf in a supermarket, I'm super psyched, but I'm much more excited when some of those customers will reach out and tell me a story or share a recipe or a photo or, that keeps me going.
It's nice to have a couple businesses, a couple projects in the mix, and we're going to talk about the book. And I want to start with the cover. It's a really, really cool cover, and I think getting an illustrated cover is quite the coup, and I'm so happy we went with that direction here because it's really a striking cover. But there's other things on the cover to talk about, and I love it. So on the top right, you have enjoyed since 350 BCE. What does that mean exactly? I love that.
Well, I mean, the book is a history of sesame, and sesame seeds have been harvested since 3,500 BCE. I mean, it's a 5,000-year-old crop ingredient, and the book is really as much a story and a history of the seed, how it's traveled, how it's been enjoyed across cultures and places all around the world. So it's a very much an ancient seed, and I wanted to honor that.
And then on the bottom, below your name, there are many ways sesame are spelled and stated throughout the world. Tell me about this and why that's such an important part of the cover.
I mean, I really wanted to differentiate this book from other Middle Eastern style books. I mean, because tahini and halva are typically associated with Middle Eastern cuisine, at least in the way I've experienced it over the last few years. And, we want to give credit to a lot of chefs and restaurants that have brought tahini into the kind of forefront of our of menus and our cooking. But for me, as an Australian and as someone who's traveled around the world a lot, I've really seen that it's not just a Middle Eastern beloved ingredient, and it really has so much presence and history in the food of Asia. So I really wanted to talk about how sesame is used in Japan, particularly. Or there's some recipes in the book that are featured from Taiwanese chefs or Korean chefs, Thai chefs, Indian chefs, and so I really wanted to globalize the book and make sure that people who were enjoying it would get the best of Middle Eastern cuisine, but also feel that there is a global connection to the rest of it.
That was really essential. Obviously, East Asia, sesame oil is used in so much of the cooking. It's a predominant flavor profile.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you did a really nice job because the book really does focus on tahini, and that's your business, and we're going to get into that, but giving nods to the world. Very nice. Let's broadly talk about cooking with tahini in particular. We see it everywhere. You look at New York Times Cooking, and many of the recipes on the savory side and the baking side throw in tahini in a great way. I say throw in, is actually artfully integrate, I'll say that. But I would like to know broadly, what does cooking with tahini allow the home cook to do?
Great question. I mean, it's multi-pronged, my answer on that. So first of all, I'll start with taste. I really love the taste of sesame. I mean, I think it adds this nuttiness that obviously it's not a nut, but it adds this kind of depth of flavor and complexity to a dish, particularly something like a cookie. I think that is one of my favorite use cases of tahini. So, a chocolate chip cookie is always delicious. No one's ever going to complain about a chocolate chip cookie. But I think adding the tahini to that cookie adds something that people they take their bite and they're like, ooh, what am I tasting? And they can't always pinpoint it, but they know that there's something really deeply pleasurable about that taste and flavor.
Yeah.
So that's the flavor side of it. But I think the other thing is it's an oil, really. It's a fat source and it's an emulsifier. So it's a great addition. Instead, it's a great substitution for things like butter or cream or a dairy product. But it just adds that sort of yummy, sort of almost buttery, silky texture to something, a creaminess without the cream, if you like.
Right. It has like a nuttiness, I agree. It has that earthiness that sometimes you want in a savory dish too.
Yes, yeah.
I really like a piece of writing that you have early in the book, and it's something. It tackles this idea of when you have your tahini, you pull it out to cook with it. You always have to add a liquid. It's similar to gochujang in a way. You can't just like throw tahini onto something. It's a little difficult to manipulate.
Yeah.
You have articulated a lot of the stress that we get because when you're integrating tahini with water or some kind of lemon juice or some citrus juice, there's this moment where you're like, am I doing it wrong? And I think we all encounter that. Talk about that writing, because it was
I love that question, and I love that section of the book. I think the section of the book, I called it Lessons in Chemistry or Lessons in Tahini Chemistry, because I think it really throws a lot of people. They'll add the liquid and then counterintuitively they expect it to sort of almost dilute the product, and somehow just whisking that is going to, work and immediately create this smooth, silky dressing. But actually what happens is that it gets all clumpy and sticky and gluggy, and people kind of have this panic moment where they're like, oh, this didn't work, this looks terrible. And I love watching that sort of revelation moment where you just patiently add a little bit more liquid, and whether it's an acid like lemon juice or vinegar or pickle juice or whatever you're adding, or just water, it's just, you slowly add a little bit more water and you keep patiently whisking, and just almost miraculously it'll go from this clumpy seized bowl of, mush to a really beautiful, creamy, whipped, and it almost looks, pillowy within seconds. And I've always loved that moment because people kind of, their eyes pop out of their minds and they're like, wow, it went from that to that with a fork, a bowl, no food processor, no blender, just, 2 or 3 ingredients and you're good, and, you're good to go.
I love that. So you're suggesting a fork and a small bowl. What about a whisk and a large bowl? What's the best way to...
I mean, a whisk and a large bowl. I mean, it all works, but I love to be able to show people like, hey, you got your jar of tahini, you've got a tap, you've got a lemon, a little bit of salt and a fork, and it's going to work with a fork and a small bowl, but yes, a whisk as well.
I want to talk about the baking side right now, because I feel like tahini integrated into pastry, into dessert, has been this big moment in the past half decade. And it's not just, a Japanese or Korean inspired, blondie or snickerdoodle. It's like you're seeing it everywhere. And in your book, you have many examples. What's the benefit of baking with tahini? What are some big ideas we can think about when using it?
I mean, I love to add it to chocolate. I think chocolate and tahini are just such a dreamy combination. So there's a lot of great recipes in the book, like chocolate tahini brownies. There's a chocolate tart. There's one of my favorite recipes in the book is one of the first things I ever tried actually using tahini, which was just to combine tahini and dark chocolate. And I melt the dark chocolate, you add the tahini, and it adds that earthy complex flavor that you talked about earlier, but it's the emulsifier, it's the fat, it's the creaminess. And so I love that recipe particularly because it's literally a 2-ingredient chocolate truffle. Happens to be vegan, dairy-free, but that isn't, for me, the kind of call-out. It's just the simplicity of the ingredients, the 2 flavors, very little work involved. And, sometimes I keep them in my freezer and you just pull them out cube by cube to have on your own or as an entertaining dish. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really that we talked about, that earthy complex flavor and it's that secret flavor that somehow people kind of can't put their finger on. I think one of the other desserts that I love in the book is the crumble. There's a peach crumble, but the top, the topping for the crumble, I call it a crumble. I think Americans might kind of call it more of a cobbler.
Yeah.
But it's the topping has a lot of tahini and a bit of miso and, a bit of flour. Actually, it does call for a little bit of butter as well. But so it's not a vegan crumble, but it's the tahini and the miso as well that really make it that kind of, whoa, I wasn't expecting that flavor. What is in that?
I love that. Tahini and miso, what amazing partners.
One of my favorite combinations. Both savory and sweet. And I love now adding miso and tahini to sweet recipes as well as savory.
How did you develop the recipes? You probably had a lot of feedback over the years running a tahini company and you probably have lots of friends suggesting ways to cook with it. How did that work, the actual development?
I mean, the recipe development didn't really happen over the last 2 years. I would sort of say it's almost been happening since I was about 5 years old. I've always loved to be in a kitchen and I've always felt very comfortable just trialing things. I've actually, as much as I adore cookbooks and I collect them and I love cookbooks, I've never really been someone who pulls open a recipe book and follows everything precisely. I've always felt great and it's been a creative expression for me to just be in a kitchen and try things. So I do think if there's one space where I'd say I feel quite fearless, it would be in a kitchen. So the recipe development has just been, I knew intuitively that a lot of flavors were going to work together and it was a gut feeling. I think the hard part of the development was the precision part of it because when I cook, I throw a bit of this and I throw a bit of that and I don't follow recipes that well myself.
Your editors want a little more precision.
I know.
Typically.
I know. It was hard. It was really hard for me to go, is it a half teaspoon of salt or a full? That was a very tricky process for me. But thankfully, I had a lot of help.
Yeah, you had some help in the development. I like that. Well, I love the recipe Green on Green on Green. What a great title. And I want to make it. It sounds, it's totally my speed. Tell us about that.
Oh, I love that dish. It's, when you see, well, for me at least, when I think about that recipe, even just thinking about it, the back of my mouth is tingling. My taste buds are already tingling and I haven't even got the picture in front of me, but I just know that feeling. So so the recipe calls for a green tahini sauce, and I'll come to that in a second. And then I've grilled some broccolini over the top, but any greens are going to work. I broiled them, I think. Australians say grilled. But so it's got some veggies on the top, and then it's got a little bit of a green dukkha over the pistachio forward dukkha over the top. So that's the green base, the green veggies, and then the green top. But it's really the sauce for me that is the key to this dish. And so the sauce has got a lot of green herbs. It's got some cilantro, some parsley, some dill, but the key to it is the green limes. And so and a green jalapeno. Oh. So just lots of green flavor, the spicy jalapeno, but the acidity from the lime is just...
I love this. I love...
I love this sauce so much.
And tahini is this like root flavor profile, but you're getting the vegetal side and the spice.
Yeah.
Really
I
cool.
make a jar of that sauce and it will last in the fridge for a couple of weeks actually. Well, hopefully you use it quicker than that. Yeah. But sometimes I'll make a big batch of that sauce and then just leave it in the fridge, and it works with veggies or a protein or over a sandwich or sourdough, whatever you're going to spread it on.
I'm all for having a tahini-based sauce in the fridge. It's non-dairy. You're not really worrying about any kind of spoilage in that way. And it's so nice to have that. And I have to say, you have an amazing, spice mix sauce section. It's quite elaborate. in a way. So check that out too.
I do want to give a quick shout out for that recipe, actually. We were talking before about recipe development and the green sauce for that recipe. I was very inspired by a chef called Amy Yee, who was the chef at a cafe called Westbourne in Soho that closed during the pandemic. But she had come up with a similar version of that green tahini sauce, and when Westbourne closed, I missed that sauce so much, and ended up making it a lot at home, and that was really the inspiration for that.
Oh, we're big fans of Westbourne on the show. We've talked about it with the sadness of Westbourne going away. And we'll have more on Westbourne for future episodes. Believe me.
Nice.
We often ignore the final recipe in a cookbook, but not here. So on page 215, you have a recipe for this really nice, slightly complicated, but I like it, bittersweet chocolate tahini tart. Rachel, take us through this recipe.
It is a little bit complicated, but,
Not a bad thing.
No, I kind of think, if you're going to go to the effort of creating something, a baked tart, this is something that I would make when I'm entertaining guests or friends. I probably am not going to make it on my own on any given Tuesday, but it is something special to make, and it's worth it. And I really think the steps are worth it. So that recipe is actually shared by a chef called Maura Kilpatrick. She's the executive chef and owner of a place up in Boston or Cambridge called Sofra. And I met Maura a couple of years ago, and she's just one of the most inspiring, humble, wonderful chefs. And so this is her recipe. But when we made it for the cookbook shoot, I will say that we, made lots of dessert. Obviously we had to make everything, and everyone on the shoot crew would taste everything. But this particular dish was everyone's favorite. We gobbled up this entire tart after the shoot and said, why didn't we make two?
I love that feeling.
But yeah, I mean, it's an amazing, so the crust is made with some cookies and sesame. It's really pretty. It's got a speckled look because it calls for both black and white sesame or some, and the Oreo cookies. Then it's filled with a tahini ganache, and it's really simple, bitter. Actually, that is the simplest part of the recipe. And then it's topped with this halva whipped cream, and it's simple and elegant, 100% worth it. I hope everyone makes that dish.
Do you ever consider that halva and Reese's peanut butter cups, which is a micro theme on the show, they're like kind of cousins?
Yeah.
How do you feel about it? I've said this before, but I want to ask the expert.
Well, actually, funny you mention not so much Reese's peanut butter cups, but actually the closest analogy to halva that we often share with someone who's never tried it before is I often say it's like the inside of a Butterfinger. It's got that sort of nutty, kind of slightly chewy, flaky texture, and it's got that earthiness or the nuttiness that you're kind of getting from either Reese's or a Butterfinger. But yeah, I'd love to. I love to combine like the tahini in a little chocolate cup, or that combination definitely is a winner.
You've expanded my mind, because that is exactly right. Because it wasn't quite the peanut butter cup, but it was definitely some kind of commercial candy. And I am like the biggest halva fan. Some people like don't hang with it because I think they've had inferior products. Whenever I visit family in Israel, I'm like going to the market, I'm buying big bricks of it, smuggling it back. But then we've got Seed and Mill that kind of does the work for me.
I think for we get a lot of that. People often come up to our counter and they'll say, "Oh, I hate halva," and then I love to be able to say, "But just try this one." And it's partially about quality of ingredients and the way that you're folding the tahini together with the sugar that creates the right texture. So all of those components will make a big difference. But also, I think it's the way that you're eating it. So it does need to, in my opinion, I think it's best enjoyed, in a small bite with a hot drink. Like I love to have a little cube of halva with some coffee or tea, and then it melts in your mouth.
Yeah.
And it's also very, very much about the storytelling and thinking about where it comes from and the nostalgia. And for me, kind of connecting the food with the culture and the history and where it comes from really adds to that experience. So I think when people come and chat to us at Cedar Mill or anywhere else and they hear about, well, where does this come from? How's it made? All of that really adds to their overall experience. And I mean, 9 times out of 10, they walk away and go, wow, actually, I thought I hated halva, but I don't.
It's a wonderful statement. My dad was the biggest halva fan, and we always went to like places in Chicago and got it. And it was, after I tried yours, to be honest, like a decade ago, I was like, this is the best halva I've ever had, because I was used to like the more industrial products. And it's just something about it. And I suggest all listeners try halva once in your life if you haven't tasted it because it's so unique.
Yeah.
That texture.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
how do you get that texture with your producers in Israel?
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly what differentiates halva from almost any other candy. And so it is very much a textural experience. And, it should be a bit flaky and a bit dense, but not too chewy. And it should, honestly, the best kind of halva you should be able to put it in your mouth and it should just melt gently. But yeah, the texture is very hard to achieve. And it's, again, one of those things that's much more an art than a science, or equal parts art and science. I mean, it's a very precise recipe, but you need to fold the sugar, a very, very hot sugar kind of mixture together with the tahini. But if you overfold it or overmix it, it'll break. And if you undermix it, then it sort of, just doesn't kind of emulsify and come together. I mean, I wish I could take people on tours of watching halva made in person, because I think once you see the work and the artisanship and the craftsmanship in it, it changes everything.
Are you visiting your producers with frequency? And then have you ever made it to Ethiopia to see where the seeds are grown?
Haven't made it to Ethiopia. That's on my bucket list. And yes, I do. I visit my producers and my partners over there all the time. They really feel like an extension of my family. They're the most wonderful, loving family. And, they're actually, they were refugees from Iraq in the 50s and came to Israel via Iraq and brought with them all of these heritage recipes and techniques. And, we've kind of made sure that we're very, very careful about where we're sourcing both the tahini from and all the inclusions. So our pistachios are Turkish pistachios that are really vibrant and green. And we really wanted the customer to feel that difference of, wow, this is made with a lot of love.
It's a beautiful story. I'd love to talk to the producers one time.
Yeah. Why don't we go on a trip to Israel one day? We'll go record a podcast from the factory.
That is on the list. It's a beautiful immigration story in Israel, and I'd love to meet with them and talk to them
Let's do it.
And see this really hot sugar being folded into tahini.
Okay, don't have to ask me twice, Matt. I am going to blow your mind.
Yeah, we're going to do this.
Oh, one last thing. When you eat halva hot, when you pull it out of those big copper bowls and it's still hot, there is nothing that's going to replace that culinary experience for you.
Rachel, on This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid-fire, fast and furious taste check. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
The best fruit.
I'm going to say mangoes, and they have to be from Australia. Sorry.
No, amazing. One thing, we don't cover the Australian, native fruit scene that much. Tell me about the Australian mangoes.
Well, there's this type of mango grown in Queensland called Kensington Pride mangoes, and they are just my favorite mango. I've never tasted one like that. And whenever I would come back to Sydney, the very first thing I would do is go to one of the they're very seasonal, so you can only get them for about 2 months during the summer. And I would buy a tray of them. And I think there'd be about 12 mangoes in a tray, and that's all I will eat for about a week.
Amazing. I love that memory. The worst vegetable.
That's hard because I really love vegetables.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to really think about that, but I'm going to say parsnip because I put parsnip in chicken soup, and that's about the only time I'm ever going to buy a parsnip.
Yeah. Parsnips have been taking some L's as of late on this question, and I think it's a good answer. The best dessert.
Easy one for me. I'm obsessed with apple tart tatin. If there is an apple tart tatin on a menu, I am not ordering it. And I'm going to tell you that I had one last week from my local, the Chelsea Hotel, which just opened on 23rd Street again after many years.
Yeah.
Cafe Chelsea have this incredible, I think it's called the Chelsea Cafe, actually.
Yeah.
Either way, they have an amazing apple tart tatin.
It's such a great dish. And
the best.
You got to get the butter right, too.
The best.
It's all about that. All right. You're well-traveled. Big question. Your favorite city outside America to visit for food?
Oh, Matt, I am very well traveled, and that's such a hard question. But I'm gonna go back to my roots, and I'm gonna say Sydney for me has so much fantastic food, and it's really a melting pot of so many kind of immigrants and kind of culinary cuisine from all over the world. But I love eating out in Sydney.
Oh my gosh, still the best nam cha dim sum I've ever had in my life.
Yes.
Golden Century. Oh my God.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, we need to have a debrief on that.
I know, it's a great place. I'm sure there
I
are.
love Golden Century.
Yeah, there's so many spots in Sydney. What a great food city.
Yeah.
Let's actually go there for a sec on the mic. One restaurant in Sydney that you cannot miss as a traveler there.
My favorite restaurant used to be Billy Kwong by Kylie Kwong. She's an amazing chef. Her food is just off the charts exquisite. But it actually closed recently, so let me think about that. I mean, I'm going to kind of probably go for, there's a Vietnamese restaurant called Phamish, Phamish, and I'm obsessed with Phamish. Amazing Vietnamese food.
A restaurant you wish you could bring back from the dead.
Oh, dead. As in like closed.
Closed. Not there anymore. Years ago, could have been last week.
There's a restaurant that I used to love eating at. It was in Tel Aviv. It was on a street called Schenken Street, and it was called Orner and Ella. And I think it closed maybe 10 years ago, but I lived in Tel Aviv in the 90s, and I would eat there every week. And I think I read somewhere that Yotam Ottolenghi may have worked there at a point in time, but I think it trained a lot of iconic chefs, and it was an incredible small institution, very inspiring.
Incredible restaurants in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
Schenken's got some great ones.
Yeah.
All right, big one. Your top New York City restaurant of 2024.
Matt, I really eat out in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I do like to eat out when I travel, but when I'm in New York, I'm really loyal to my people. And actually, one book that I read over the Christmas break just recently was Will Guidara's Unreasonable Hospitality that I'd never read. It's been out for a few years, but I love that book. And particularly, he talks a lot about how you feel in a restaurant and the hospitality experience. And so I'm going to kind of come back to a shout out for kind of either Cookshop or Choquette, both owned by Vicky. But the way I feel in their restaurants is as important to me as the food that I'm served. So I'm going to name Choquette.
It's a great reminder to just when you love a restaurant, just become a patron.
Yeah.
Restaurants need support, and we have so many new restaurants. You're going to read Grub Street or Eater and want to go to all the places. And I love new restaurants and support them, but support the guys that you really like more often than not, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, I walk into those two restaurants and they know who I am, and they welcome me like I'm an extended member of their family, and nothing replaces that feeling and that experience than the meal.
Your favorite cookbook of all time?
Oh, I knew you would ask me that, and I have about 1,000 cookbooks.
Nice.
Actually, Matt. I collect
Keeping us
them.
in business here. I love that.
I live for cookbooks, even though I don't necessarily read all the recipes. I actually just flick through them like novels. I do. I love everything that's ever been written by Claudia Roden. I think she's a really she's an iconic Middle Eastern icon, and she now lives in London. But there's a couple of recipes from some of her books, particularly she has a recipe for a whole orange and almond cake that I've made every single year for my kids' both of their birthdays. And I love her writing. And
what a great travel writer, too.
Yes.
I mean, that's the one thing about Claudia Roden. It's
amazing
recipes, of course, but just getting out in the field in the 90s.
Yeah.
Iconic.
If I can give a quick shout out as well to a more recent book that I love, and I'm pulling it out every time I want to entertain. I loved Open Kitchen by Susan Spungen. I think it's one of those books that I've pulled out every time I've wanted to entertain over the last couple of years. I've pulled it out. Her photography is great. Her styling's great. And the recipes are all the things that I want to make all the time.
Great call. And you should check out our Susan Spungen episode in our archive because we have a great conversation with Susan. Last one, your favorite sandwich.
Oh, sandwich. I don't eat a lot of sandwiches, I'm going to be honest, but I'm obsessed with sourdough bread.
Yeah.
So I love sourdough toast. kind of probably going to say I love a Vegemite and butter sourdough toast.
Yes. It
I don't
showed
know
up at the end. The Vegemite had to show up.
I don't know if your audience even knows what Vegemite.
Oh, I think a few might have a jar in the fridge.
Yeah, I mean, it's a polarizing ingredient. A lot of people don't love it, but it needs a lot of butter.
I love it.
Has to be sourdough for me, and it has to be toasted.
The toast is the answer. Rachel Simons, what a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining This Is Taste.
Thanks so much for having me, Matt. This has been great.
Emilia Petrarca, This Is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so happy to get to chat with you. You're one of my favorite writers, and I feel like putting a voice to the byline is always such a delight.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm a little under the weather, but I don't normally sound like this.
It's okay. I feel like the springtime allergies have made
yes.
all of my recent episodes a lot more nasally than they normally would be. But you sound great, and it's so fun to have you on the show. I wanted to invite you on because I have been loving your newsletter, Shop Rat, and your writing in general. And I read like a recent piece of yours about what you call the resSTOREaunt. So stores, all caps in that. And I wanted to chat with you about it because I think it's such an interesting moment in like food culture and shopping culture that we're in. And I'm wondering to start if you could kind of define what a resSTOREaunt is to someone who's listening and hasn't maybe like thought about a name in that kind of way.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm not the only one who noticed this, but there are a lot of I guess you could call them like it's like either a restaurant or like a coffee bar within a restaurant opening up in New York, and it just felt like so many places where you could get a coffee or a meal were branded now that I wanted to go out and try a bunch of different ones to see like, you know, sort of what the experience was like, if the food was good. But in terms of what they look like, it can range from a restaurant within a department store. It could be Uniqlo opened its own like cafe called like the Uniqlo Cafe. The Armani restaurant reopened in New York. I went to, this is not in New York, but in London, Alaya brought in this like very popular London-based bakery into its store. So it just felt like the food and fashion crossover was happening in a more intense way. Oh, and sorry, there was one more that I wanted to mention, which is Louis Vuitton opened a cafe uptown, and it was like impossible. It's impossible to get a reservation. There's like entire Reddit threads about it, and that was another one that stood out to me.
Yeah, I think they're all great examples. I think when I think about what a resSTOREaunt is in my previous experience, the Bloomingdale's Cafe, obviously, an iconic early one, or I was in London at the end of last year, and I was at the Dover Street Market there, and they have a Rose Bakery location up on the third floor, which is a popular bakery in London as well. And I think it's really interesting to think about like why these kind of like department stores or brands would be interested in bringing like food into the building and like what kind of purpose the restaurant serves. And I'm curious in your reporting if you saw any kind of common threads there in terms of like what the intention is and maybe like how it actually looks like in practice.
Yeah. So, like you said, it's not a new thing at all. It makes like practical sense to offer dining in a store, especially a department store, because the idea is that you stay a while. They want to make sure. I whenever I go shopping, I always make sure that I have a big meal beforehand because shopping is cardio. It can be exhausting. You don't want to be in a bad mood when you're trying on jeans. You don't want to be hangry. So yeah, it is in a store's best interest to provide you with food and beverage. So yeah, not a new thing, but I guess what I noticed this time around that felt different was the sheer number of them happening at once. And also I felt like something that is maybe another reason why these stores might be offering food and beverage right now is because the price of goods has just gotten so insane that a coffee or a Louis Vuitton monogrammed dessert is, for a lot of people, the only way that they can really buy into these brands. And I think before, that category used to be perfume or sunglasses, or you can get like a keychain or something. And, those are still there's entry points for, these luxury brands. But even those things are, it could be like $600 for a pair of sunglasses. So by comparison, a $25 dessert is a much easier way in, and you can Instagram it, and it still has this sort of level of exclusivity to it because reservations are impossible to get a hold of. So it allows people to like feel like they're participating in this sort of rarefied world without, going into debt.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. And I think the like proximity to the store is also something that's interesting to me, because I think the Polo Bar here in New York, which is Ralph Lauren's restaurant, like that, to me, that's a good example of like, this is a restaurant by a brand that's been around for a while now. That's a really difficult reservation. And like, I don't actually shop at Ralph Lauren that often, but I don't think there's a store attached to it, right? It's kind of like a standalone place.
Yeah, it's its own thing. And there's also Ralph's Coffee, which was another sort of like, I think one of the sort of earlier examples of a luxury brand getting into coffee and cookies. And the Polo Bar, it's like, it's very obviously Ralph Lauren, but no, you could potentially go in there and have no idea that it was affiliated with Ralph Lauren.
Yeah, it's like the same aesthetic, but then like fashion influences so many different things. So there could be another restaurant that has the Ralph Lauren vibe, but that's just because it's like an aspirational thing to aspire to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for the brand, it's also just another great way to like bring you into their world, and especially for a brand like Ralph Lauren or Armani, where they have, they have home lines, they sell pillows, they sell bed sheets, they sell, other things. So it's like another way to show off their like the range of their products as well, and make you want to like, have Ralph Lauren or Armani be in your closet, but also like throughout your home as well.
Yeah. So for your newsletter, you did this kind of experiment where you went around for the whole day just kind of eating at all of these different restaurants. I'm curious what that was like for you, if there were any things that you ate that you felt like stood alone on the food perspective, or if everything was kind of like colored with this status of the brand that was associated with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I started at Printemps, which is a new department store in down on Wall Street. It's a Parisian department store, and this is, I think, their first. Yeah, it's their first New York location. And I went, and there was a line like down the block. It was opening day, so I should have known. But so I quickly bailed and went up to the Uniqlo Cafe instead, where I spent, I think, $7 on a matcha latte. That was like totally fine. It did not taste like a Uniqlo. Like there was nothing Uniqlo about it other than the like Uniqlo.
Did you do like
on it.
alt milk in the matcha latte? What was the?
Good question. I think I did regular milk.
I'm thinking about like the cost. I feel like $7 for a matcha with alt milk in Manhattan, unfortunately, I would think is pretty par for the course.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think I just like don't really like matcha, but it was more the like the vibe in the store. It felt like I was drinking a matcha in a store. Like there was not really, it didn't feel luxurious to me at all. It was like I felt like I was a little bit in a sort of fluorescent lit lighting airport terminal or something. So I got out of there pretty quickly. And then I was up by Louis Vuitton, but I sort of after having read these Reddit threads and set like a million Resi alerts, like literally for every hour of every day for like a week straight, I was like, this is not worth my time. So I did not go to Louis Vuitton, and I did not go to the Polo Bar. So basically I found with my day of trying to like eat at these spots that like I couldn't get into half of them. But I did eventually go to Printemps, I think that Monday, and it was raining. It was like 11 a.m. And I walked right in, and their like full restaurant hadn't opened yet, but they have a champagne bar on the second floor, and it was completely packed with people. And I was sort of surprised to see so many people drinking wine at like 11:30 in the morning, but good for them. And I got myself a chocolate chip cookie, which to me is like a really important thing for any sort of cafe or bakery or store to have. And it was really good. So I was happy about that.
I'm glad the cookie was good. And I think Printemps is a really interesting example because they have Chef Gregory Gourdet, who's doing, I believe, like all of the dining across all 5 of the kind of culinary options available there, which, he's been on the Taste podcast before. He is a James Beard Award winning chef from the West Coast, from the Pacific Northwest. So I think to have a department store that from your New York Mag story seems like doesn't even have like a ton of retail necessarily. Like it's more about the experience. The fact that they would have like 5 different options for people to like eat or drink something while they're there seems like a really like conscientious effort to be kind of leaning into this kind of like the brand as an experience space.
Definitely. Yeah. I interviewed for my newsletter Laura Lundrum, who she's with Printemps, but she used to be at Ralph Lauren and was a part of the team that launched Ralph's and the Polo Bar. And she also used to work at Dia and DeLuca, which was my like all-time favorite luxury grocery store in Soho.
So good.
The best chocolate chip cookie for an exorbitant amount of money. So it makes a lot of sense if she, with her involvement, it makes a lot of sense that the store would be leaning into food and beverage. But yeah, I mean, it's a little sparse right now. I think that they'll eventually get more merchandise in, but yeah, the idea is that it's a place that you will want to hang out like all day, or for any sort of like in between moment that you might have throughout the day. And I think in a area like Wall Street, having a sort of luxurious, fun, colorful, like energetic place to hang out is really important. And as evidenced by the fact that everyone was drinking there at 11:30 a.m. in the morning, I think people are clearly like craving a space like that.
Yeah, I'm curious how much you think this idea of trying to win people back to be shopping like in person in stores fits into this, like whether that's another kind of lure that you can come by and see if it, if you fit into this in the moment, and that you can also like get a coffee or a glass of champagne or something while you're there.
Yeah, for sure. I think people really want to hang out and they want to shop. They might not necessarily be able to buy anything, but like drop a ton of money in one place. But yeah, they're looking for experiences. And I think especially now that like people aren't in the office so much, or they're working from home more on the weekends, it's like, okay, where can I go? And museums are great and there's parks and everything, but a store is just like, it's such a sensory, indulgent experience. And especially when things are so depressing right now in the world, I just think like a place like Printemps, which is, it truly feels like Disneyland, or I don't know if you've seen Wicked, but like the Shiz University, that kept coming to mind. Like it really feels like you're sort of stepping into another fantasy world, and it's fun and it's bright and everyone's happy and drinking, and yeah, I just think that there's a real craving for that right now, and in New York, whether you're a local or a tourist down on Wall Street.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I guess like this dovetails into another conversation that I think media is always having, which is about like, where does the fashion crowd in New York like to eat out these days? I know there was a big story about Ralph's, which I think was such a great restaurant. But I imagine that you're probably not, eating at restaurants all the time, whether it's for fun or for like other brand events. I'm curious if you think there are any like restaurants or cafes or spaces that the fashion crowd is like frequenting in New York these days.
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't think it's the resSTOREaunt, although fashion people go wherever there's a free meal. I think you know, if a brand like Armani is like the fashion crowd, they like to go somewhere where they can get a free meal, but also where they don't have to feel like the riffraff who have to go on Resi and make a reservation. Like I think one of the only ways that you can like get into the Polo Bar is if you have like the email of the maitre d' or something like that. And so that's I think the part of the appeal of it is that you have to know somebody, you have to know the right people to get into it. So maybe the Armani restaurant is similar to that as well. I think that they're also eating at places like Veau d'Or, which is a new restaurant uptown from the Frenchette team, I believe. And I think people like to, it's very small. You feel like you're time traveling a little bit. It's, they took a former space in New York and sort of zhuzhed it, redid it, but like kept all of the look and feel of the space. So it feels not of this modern time. I think they're eating at places that feel cozy and warm and secluded and private, and also just expensive.
Yeah.
And, I mean, gold is like in the name of the restaurant, and you just feel like you're somewhere else and living the good life when you're there.
Yeah, I think the fantasy of the restaurant dovetailing with the fantasy of the outfit makes a lot of sense. And I guess, where do you like to go eat when you don't want to bump into fashion people?
Oh, God. Such a good question. I moved to Park Slope thinking that I would be safe, but I'm certainly not. It's just like my local spot. I go to Aldila, which is like a really good Italian restaurant in Park Slope, and so far I have not run into anyone there, but I wouldn't be surprised if I did. I don't think you can go anywhere in New York and not run into people.
Yeah, it's kind of like Murphy's Law. Whenever you think that you are not going to see anyone, then you see everybody.
Yeah. Park Slope has not. I'm not marked safe in Park Slope.
I wanted to turn this into like a semi-advice column for me. I feel like every spring I completely forget how to dress for the weather. And then now that outdoor dining is a thing again and people are kind of getting their parklets set back up, I run into this question of like, what do I wear when I'm going out to dine in the spring in New York? And I'm curious if you have any answers from yourself or like things that you've been noticing that you think are good ideas.
I've written about this before, but I called it restaurant pajamas, which is like, I'm not suggesting that anyone wear like actual pajamas to a restaurant, but I like to have my restaurant outfit give this sort of air of pajamas in the sense that it's comfortable and but also, like I'm talking like pajama suit set where it feels luxurious too. You're not like in like boxers and a tank top or something.
Big
Like
t-shirt, yeah.
I'm talking a night suit. So yeah, I like it to be like a little slinky, a little but like comfort. Comfort is key for me. It's like my favorite thing to do is stay for as many hours as I possibly can at a restaurant. And so you want to be in something that you feel good in, preferably stretchy waistband. Yeah, I don't know. I think in New York we don't dress up too much to go out to restaurants, and I'm just coming from Milan which I love visiting because everyone is really dressed up. I never pack jeans when I go to Milan, and I love that. It's just if a restaurant is really like an occasion, whereas I feel like in New York restaurants are just like, it's like my extension of like my home because I never eat at home. So I think the restaurant pajamas idea is like making it feel like homey and cozy, but also like a little bit elevated, not too fancy, not like Taylor Swift try hard, but not like Justin Bieber slob, somewhere in between.
Yeah, I think for me, I always wanted to be like, not something I would wear just to work around the house at home or go over to my friend's place, but also not like something that still feels comfortable. Because you're right, you want to kind of settle in and enjoy the meal and just kind of like be present in the space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm also always thinking about like waist up. It doesn't really matter what you wear on the bottom.
Yeah. I guess before you go, I'm curious if you have any other thoughts about like the intersection of fashion and food in this current moment. Sorry,
Yeah,
that's broad.
no, it's okay. I guess I would say it's like it's always been there, but it's like heightened right now in this economy. And something that I maybe didn't touch upon as much as the other points is like just people wanting to sort of signal something by visiting these establishments and sharing that they were there. That like walking around, I think that there was maybe a time when walking around with like a designer coffee cup was sort of lame. And I don't know, it seems to be not as lame right now. And it's like a sign that you went to the place and you did the thing. And it's not like such a mass thing. It's not as accessible. And so it's like kind of a flex to say that you got a reservation at some branded restaurant or got a cup of coffee from. I feel like we're also, that sort of relates to the bakery craze that we're in. I feel like we're in a sort of cronut moment again where people are lining up for insane amounts of time to get a pastry. And I don't know what that says about I think people are just like dying for something that feels like good and comforting and special, and a pastry or a dessert is that. And but you also and they're expensive, but they're not as expensive as a pair of sunglasses. So maybe it's like a recession indicator. I don't know, but
yeah, I think so. I'm right now recording this like 2 blocks away from the Louis Vuitton cafe, and I was on the Google reviews, and it says like the most mentioned things. So like some people mention the ravioli, or some people mention the appetizers, but the most mentioned keyword in the reviews right now is the monogram.
Interesting,
because it's on every single piece of thing that you order there. Even like the burger bun has a kind of like branded monogram on the top. So I think you're definitely onto something there in terms of like people wanting to participate in things and people wanting to signal that they're able to do so.
Yeah, and it's very Instagrammable. I think it sort of folds into the whole like people wanting to travel, wanting to show that it's like less about a thing and more about a lifestyle. And I think yeah, I don't know that I could stomach a Louis Vuitton branded burger, but for some people that's like the ultimate luxury. So go off.
Well, if we ever get the reservation, you're welcome to come and split one with me. This was great, Emilia. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is Taste is hosted and produced by Aliza Barbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.